Hi guys, welcome back to the Pageant project. Got some exciting news. Well, it's exciting for me. I don't know how exciting it will be for you. But yesterday, I booked my flights to the US to head over to watch Miss USA. Although I think it's now called Miss Universe USA. I keep forgetting that. And it's going to be the 75th anniversary. So it's going to be super exciting. I have never seen Miss USA or Miss Universe USA. And last year when I went over to Miss Volunteer America, that was actually the first large-scale American pageant that I had seen. And I was blown away. But bear in mind, you have to understand that as someone from Australia, we don't have the same sort of pageant culture that exists in a lot of states. I don't think it exists in all of the states, but certainly in a lot of states in the US, particularly in the South. And Miss Volunteer America was born and is held in Tennessee, which from all my experience is one of the big pageant states, and was held in the Carl Perkins Civic Center. And everyone has told me that the production values of Miss Volunteer America are amongst some of the best in the industry. And so maybe I was a bit spoiled in terms of my first big American pageant experience to see that, because maybe not every pageant is like that, even in America. And I will say, I have seen a couple of other pageants in America, and the production values were fine, more in line with maybe a big pageant over here in Australia. But I had never seen anything like Miss Volunteer America. And if you haven't seen Miss Volunteer America, I do recommend it as a great watch, even if you're not supporting someone necessarily who's competing. They have not only a very large, well-lit stage, they have fantastic video and audio production. You'll see the people behind the mixing desk with the cameras on, is it the cranes? Not steady cams, because that's the one that you hold. But the cranes and the gimbals, and they have multiple large screens behind the stage. And when the girls come out in their groups, they have the sort of very sassy, almost Victoria's Secret large screen pre-recorded videos that show the girls on stage. They also have live entertainment. It wasn't probably until the second or third night I was there that I realized that the music was playing was coming from a live band, because a live band was kind of hidden behind the curtain in one of the corners. I realized that there were live performers because you could see them, but I didn't realize there was also a live band that was supporting them. And so I loved the production. It was a great show. And so I interviewed Tom Brodeur. I think many of you know this story, but just in case you don't, I interviewed Tom for the first time, I believe it was last year, so 2025. And at the time, I didn't know that he was going to be the new owner, CEO, president, head honcho, boss of Miss USA. He knew, but I didn't. A lot of people thought I did, because about a week later was when he announced that he was going to be the new boss of Miss USA. If I had known, I would have asked him about it. But it was quite funny, because when I interviewed him 2 weeks ago, and he said that he had felt kind of bad that he couldn't discuss it with me in our first interview, which I understand. You know what it's like in pageants. You got to keep a lot of things close to your chest. That's the same in business in general. But I'd been thinking about, well, I do like going to see these large-scale pageants. I think it's important for me too, because doing what I do, I think it's important to know, to have some experience at least in terms of what I'm sending you guys into. And the best way to do that by far is to go and experience it in person myself. There's so much experience that I can glean through talking with you, and I've had thousands of conversations at this point with pageant people such as yourself. So I do know a lot in terms of pageants around the world. I have a very wide-ranging experience because I've spoken to people all around the world, not just in the US and Australia. But I thought, well, if I'm going to go over to watch Miss Universe USA, this seems like a pretty good time. So it's going to be the 75th. That only happens once. I know the new owner. That doesn't happen very often. And so I mentioned to Tom afterwards that I was considering going over in August. And we had the discussion behind the scenes. He pointed out a couple of things. And, here we are 2 weeks later, and I booked my flight to go over in late August to Miami to cover Miss Universe USA, which is super exciting. Obviously, it's Miss Universe USA, and I know a bunch of people over in America, so it's super exciting. But also, in case you didn't realize, or in case you weren't thinking about it, August for us here in Australia is the middle of winter, and it doesn't get freezing. But I'm kind of like a reptile. I don't like the cold. And so the thought of being able to escape our winter to go and have a Floridian summer is very appealing. And then when I come back, it's going to be late or going into September. So that's actually going back into our spring over here. So I get to escape some of the cold over here. So that, I won't lie, that's hugely exciting. If you do see me in Miami and I'm pale, just remember it's because I'm coming from winter. I actually tan okay. It's just there won't be much sun here in winter. So if you have any recommendations as things to do, I'm sure I'll have some free time. I don't know how much free time because I'll be doing my best to cover the experience, not only for the girls who are there, but for all of you watching at home. But if you have any recommendations as to experiences to take in whilst I'm in Miami, I have been to Miami before, but not for a long time. So any recommendations, if you're in the area and you want to meet up, you want to catch up, you want to have a chat, more than happy to do that. I won't be directly coaching anyone who's competing in Miss Universe USA whilst I'm there, so please don't ask that. I am coaching someone who probably will be there, and I made a promise to her, as I would make to pretty much any of you. I only want to coach one person in any given system. It just makes it a bit easier for me. I don't have that conflict of interest where half the people on stage are my coaching clients and I play personal favorites. I don't like doing that. I think that's not the right thing to do. So aside from coaching, if you just want to catch up, meet up, if you happen to be going to Miss Universe USA, let me know. I'd love to connect with some of you. I'm not in America every day. Obviously, it is a fairly long flight. If you didn't know, it takes about 24 hours to get from door to door, maybe a bit more, from here in Sydney, Australia to over anywhere in America. And that's actually not the longest flights. When I was heading over to the UK, it would be more often 36 to 48 hours to get door to door, just because of the number of connections. I don't know if it's straight line distance, but certainly the number of connections you'd need to take to get were considerably more. So that's what's happening. It's super exciting for me, as I said, for many, many reasons. If I do happen to have my person who I'm coaching compete on stage, and if she does well, and I'm sure she will, then that's even going to be more exciting, right? For so many different reasons. But I didn't want to just get on here and tell you about my exciting news and you think here I am just, humble bragging, although I guess I kind of am. What it reminded me of, I've been in this industry probably for around 10 years now, maybe a bit more. I honestly don't remember because it's not like I had an official start date, but it was certainly around about 10 years ago. And I never thought that at some point in time, this sort of thing would be happening to me, or I'd have this sort of opportunity. When I started doing this, frankly, I didn't know that this sort of opportunity would even exist. And the reason I bring that up is because if you are someone who is considering starting in pageantry, or maybe you already started in pageantry, and you are more, not even you're at the beginning of the journey. You could be middle of the journey. You could be 10 years into your journey. But you never know, I think, whether it's in pageantry, a hobby, or your career, you never know where you're going to end up if you persist. And not only if you persist, but you know why you persist. And then on top of that, you always try to do right by people. And I think all of those are important. I think if you just persist, but you don't know why you're doing it, and you also don't really care so much about the ethics of what you do. And you might say, well, of course everyone cares about the ethics. No, they don't. I can tell you flat out, my experience has been that there are quite a lot of people out there who are very selfish and make selfish choices. And still to this day, when I, for example, preclude myself from being on a judging panel, I just turned down a judging opportunity last week for a big American pageant. And I said it's because I know so many people that if there's anyone competing at that pageant whom I know, I don't want to be on the judging panel. And even if I was, I wouldn't judge that person. I did that at Miss Earth. I judged for them, but I said anyone that I know, and there were probably 2 or 3 people that I knew, but there was also one person who was a director of one of the countries, and I said, I'm not going to judge her contestant because I won't be impartial. Even if I tried to be, it's impossible to be completely impartial. Yet when I did that, I felt quite alone. I felt like I was the exception rather than the rule. It seemed to me most other people just jumped at the opportunity to be the center of attention as a judge and lapped up all the likes and the kudos and had a bit of an ego boost. But if you're persisting and that's how you make your decisions, and I'm not necessarily sure where your journey will end up, all I can tell you is that if you persist and if you know why you're doing it, and that reason is very important. We talk about knowing your pageant why all the time, but even knowing your why in any other area. And for me, it's always been about putting you guys first, the contestants first. I've been very clear about that. That's one of only 2 things that I really keep pushing and have pushed for almost my entire career. Number 1 is that the contestants have to be put first. And number 2, we should have an industry that fosters and encourages open debate, transparency, honesty, rather than hiding things in the shadows, which I don't think helps anyone. That's my why. So you persist, you know your why, but then, as I said, you make decisions that you feel you made the best decision at the time. You tried your best to make the right decision, and right decision not just in terms of your self-interest, but just in terms of if there is a God, if there is a heaven, and you get to the gates and, you feel like you can defend your decision. You don't feel guilty about it. It's not to say you always make the right decision. Of course, with the benefit of hindsight, a lot of us, I think, would make different decisions. But it's like when they say, when people say the reason I tell the truth is because I don't have a very good memory. And I think there's a lot of common sense behind that, because at least if you tell the truth, you don't need to remember what you've told everyone. Whereas when you're consistently making up lies or you're not telling the whole truth, you need to remember who you've told what. And frankly, I think that's exhausting. But when I say making decisions for the right thing or for the right reasons, whatever that means to you, I think that really extends to also the people you surround yourself with. And believe me, if you start making decisions that, let's say, are not perhaps made with complete integrity and honesty, I'm not saying you're lying, but sometimes, you think you can get away with something. And let's say maybe you get friendly with a sponsor or a judge, and you really shouldn't be doing, but it happens, and you go, well, it's happening anyway, I'll just run with it, and everyone does it, so I'll do it too. When you make those sorts of decisions, the sorts of people, who do you attract? I think if you're behaving like that, then you tend to attract other people who behave like that. And then I think what happens is, before you know it, they magnify, let's say, the less attractive qualities within you. Whereas if you hold yourself to a higher standard than perhaps a lot of other people do, first off, my experience has been that people see it. People recognize it. Maybe not immediately, but they do see it. Secondly, you tend to attract others who also hold themselves to those high standards, or at the very least believe that those standards should be the norm in pageantry. and they magnify the positive tendencies, the positive qualities within you. And before you know it, if you're someone who's interested in creating some sort of change in this industry, whether it's big or small, surrounding yourself with those types of people enables you to do that, to have a shot at actually creating some sort of change, whether it's owning your own pageant, whether it's going into coaching, whether it's some business opportunity you want to start up. Maybe it's a combination of all of the above. But you will have built a network of people who will support you for no other reason than they like what you do. They know what you do. They trust you, and you've demonstrated with your track record over the, I'm not going to say months because I think it needs to be longer than that, but your track record over the years, maybe even longer, maybe decades, that you do the right thing at every turn to the best of your ability. Again, not saying you can be perfect, and I'm not saying that should even be the measuring stick, but I am saying that at every point you can go to sleep at night going, well, I made the best choice that I could given all the differing factors. And look, sometimes you can't make everyone happy. That's just part of the game, but at least you know why you made a decision, and you know it well enough that you can explain to someone, even if they're a bit disappointed with the way you went at the end of the day. And it's funny because what I will say, it won't be, and for me, it has not been a smooth, continuous journey upwards. There certainly have been highs and lows. So I'm bringing this to your attention because if you're someone who likes to think they do the right thing and that hopefully the right thing will be noticed, I'm telling you, I believe it will, and that you do have to stay the course. And I would fully encourage you to be someone who tries to make the right decisions whenever possible and doesn't take those moral and ethical shortcuts. But what I will tell you, there are going to be times when you wonder whether it's worth it, because there will be people who take, let's say, shortcuts that are not, that let's say lack integrity, lack honesty, not saying that they're flat out lying, but let's say they're taking some shortcuts that they probably shouldn't. And sometimes they don't get caught up on it. Sometimes they never get caught up on it. And you see them succeeding where you really feel if people knew the shortcuts that this person had taken, or that people really knew the character of this person, that she never would have won, or she never perhaps would have succeeded in the first place. And I've seen that happen more times than I would like to admit. And that can be very discouraging, right? I don't think that's a brainwave. I think anyone can understand that when you are trying to do the right thing and it doesn't get recognized, and you see people who, let's say, are not doing the right thing and they are getting recognized or they are winning, it can be very difficult. It can be quite, I'm not going to say it's depressing, but you can certainly feel whether it's worth it. And you might go, well, maybe I should take shortcuts too. But I think more than likely, if you've listened this far, you begin wondering whether you should quit pageantry because you just feel that the industry is some kind of way. And look, I wouldn't disagree with you. There's certainly, I've seen more than enough things happen that have made me question whether I want to continue in pageantry. But at some point, and there's an element of grace with my story in terms of Tom, who I won't say I know him very well, but certainly I've interviewed him twice and we've had a couple of discussions behind the scenes and we message back and forth when we need to. I do feel that when I've interviewed him, what he has said is very much the way that I think about pageantry, especially in terms of putting the girls first as an example. And so with the 75th anniversary, I think a really good example is that he is bringing a lot of the legacy queens in. And I think acknowledging them, giving them their time, acknowledging the history of the pageant, that's important, that we don't forget our previous title holders. We don't forget where we've been, our history and the important role they played. We don't just leave our title holders in the dust and forget that they ever existed. The other thing that I've liked seeing is more of an emphasis on scholarship. the economics of the situation, which is he wants to help the pageant girls, the people who are competing. He wants to help them succeed in terms of business and financially and career-wise. I think that's very important because pageantry, at the end of the day, it's a hobby. For most of us, it's not going to end up as our go-to career. And as I've said many, many times, the best way to succeed in pageantry is to create an amazing life outside of it. And one of the biggest parts of that for anyone is their career. The other thing that I have liked seeing is, I can't remember what I was going to say. There have been a lot of things that I've seen that I've liked the way he's doing it. And I think he's going about it the right way. And even in our interview, he was saying that when he took over the system, some of the damage was actually worse than even he had realized. And I'm sure he had done his due diligence when it came to the system. And if you're not aware, if you don't remember, I'm sure most of you do, but under the previous leadership, Miss USA was really in a bad place. And I think that's the reason now that there are some issues with the state directors, and some of them don't know whether they want to continue, and some of them had jumped ship, and then some of them are going, well, should I come back because I'm not sure whether I'm going to get burnt again. And I understand that, right? Certainly under the previous leadership anyway, I wouldn't blame any of them if they had wanted to step down, because they wouldn't have wanted to put their state title holders through all the controversies that were happening with Miss USA at that time. But he's aware, Tom is aware, that he needs to turn this thing around and that it's going to be an ongoing process. It's not going to happen overnight. The other thing I was going to say, I remembered, the fact that he knows that it's important that Miss USA goes back, the title holder goes back to being some sort of icon, some sort of household name. I think that really has sort of been devalued maybe over the past, I don't know, maybe 5 years. I mean, you tell me. I don't really follow those sorts of things as closely. But I think there was a time when if you were Miss USA or Miss Universe and you were in the United States, that you would be recognized. You'd be seen on red carpets everywhere, and you would be maybe not a household name, but certainly for pageant girls, you would be a well-known name. And I don't think that situation has gotten better recently. And I think Tom is very aware that that situation needs to be addressed. And so I think we've seen Audrey, the current Miss USA, on a lot more red carpets, doing a lot more appearances and sort of high-level appearances, not just local ones. Not that there's anything wrong with local appearances at all, but it's equally important to have her on a national and international stage if possible, so she can get that recognition for the brand, so that it can go back to having that prestige and having that, like any high level or prestige brand, you want that recognition. And so I'm really hopeful that we're seeing a second coming of Miss Universe USA, so to speak. Tom did mention we're going back to broadcast TV this year, and I know a lot of you, that's what you wanted. For me, it was a give or take. I was always, I tend to watch things on YouTube anyway, especially over here in Australia. It's not easy for us to get your guys in the United States or the channels that you have, at least I don't think it is. And so I watch most of my things on YouTube anyway. I very rarely turn on the TV unless it's to stream something. And so in terms of making sure Miss Universe USA is a genuine A-list celebrity again, I know Tom told me that Audrey had been to the Elton John fundraiser, and she was seeing all these people who she thought of as celebrities, but they all wanted to come up and have pictures with her because they recognize her as Miss Universe USA. I think we need more of that. As shallow as sometimes as it might seem, the world of celebrity anyway, that's really what gets people interested. That is what gets people's eyeballs, at least initially. Obviously, you want the substance behind it, but you do need to lead with style. That's what attracts us visually. And then in terms of, as I said, all the other things and turning the brand around, this seems like it's going to be I hope it's going to be a keystone moment, the 75th anniversary. But my whole point with that is that I didn't know any of this was going to happen. I know some of you like to set goals and do vision boards and things like that. All I'm saying is that sometimes you don't know what could be around the corner if only you persist. You stay the course, but you do it with that moral fortitude of making the right decisions. Because if you try and take the shortcuts, as I think you could argue the previous leadership of Miss USA did, and you try to do it, make it all about yourself rather than making it about the girls, there were a lot of people who tied their wagon to that previous leadership, and now they're probably out in the cold and looking a bit of the fool because they hitched their wagon to someone who, I think it was pretty obvious, was pretty much in it only for herself. And, that shortcut that maybe they felt was a shortcut at the time, I think has blown up in their face. And so if you've listened this far, watched this far, thank you, first off. But secondly, make sure you're in it for the long haul. If you need a cheerleader because you're persisting and you're finding it difficult, my DMs are always open. But the point of this story is, if you stay the course, eventually I think you'll see the reason for it. And look, the reason may not have anything to do with pageantry. Maybe you end up starting a business that you never could have envisaged. I know one person in particular who has started a very successful 6 or 7 figure business. And a lot of it is, not all of it, but a lot of it is to do with the pageant training she had, specifically with creating content and interview skills. Maybe you meet your perfect partner. Maybe you move to a new country, you get to see things and have adventures and experiences that you never would have, as long as you persist. But I am hoping that we are reaching a turning point, especially with US pageantry. And I think this is the final thing. The final thing I'll leave you with for today or tonight. I think having a renewed focus on American pageantry, specifically what the pageant, in terms of its opportunities, provides for you guys who are competing. And I've long thought that simply saying, the opportunity is for you to represent the US on an international stage. And I get there's a lot of patriotism associated with that, and that's a good thing. But if you're asking me to decide between, I get a trip to a foreign country to represent the US once and then that's it, I come back, or would I rather have grassroots impact and lasting legacy in my home country? I would prefer the latter. I would prefer to use my time as a title holder, whether it's national, local, state, to build lasting networks and connections and make lasting impact and legacy in my home city, in my home state, in my home country. Because my feeling has always been, when I want to take a trip, I can pay for that myself. Because sometimes what I've noticed, those international opportunities don't really go as intended. Because there are many, many different countries, many, many different cultures, specifically pageant culture. And it's one of the reasons I don't cover pageantry in every country, is because my belief systems, my value system around what pageantry could and should be, don't square with the beliefs in every country. And I'm not saying that to say that I'm right and they're wrong. It's just a self-awareness thing. I wouldn't do well. I wouldn't feel right about really covering pageantry in those countries because it's not something that I'm aligned with, and frankly, it's not something I have any interest in. Again, this comes down to doing things for the right reasons and having a bit of moral fiber and saying, nope, I'll leave that opportunity for someone else if they want to jump on it. I know what I'm here to do, and I'll live and die by that, even if it takes a bit longer. So, see you in August if you're over in Miami or Florida, and if you're going to see Miss Universe USA, come and say hello. I'd love that because I don't often get a chance to meet many of you in person. And I know a lot of you watch, listen to my create, and maybe you just watch my posts on Instagram. I don't know. And I appreciate you for doing that. But I'm excited, obviously, for myself to get to go over there. And as I said, have a nice summer in the middle of an Australian winter. But I'm also excited to see the direction that pageantry in the US in general is heading now, as opposed to remember where it was even 12 months ago. It felt, at least I felt, it was going in a pretty bleak direction. And I'm really hoping that things are turning around, and I'm excited to get to see that in person. So let me know. Let me know your thoughts, whether you agree with my summation as to what I'm thinking or any of the rants or thoughts that I had. If you're going over to Miami to watch Miss Universe USA, let me know. I'd love to meet up. And if you have any recommendations as to things to do whilst I'm over there, that'd be great too. But yeah, looks like 2026 is going pretty well at this point, at least in terms of pageantry. So thanks for watching or listening, and I'll see you next week, or even better, I hope I get to see you in Miami in August.